Group of students here to watch. All right, my recording is on, and students that are alive, I appreciate it, because as you see on the right hand side of your screen, you can click and type any questions you have, and James won't be watching that. I will. So all you have to do is talk. I'll watch for the questions and plug them in when we need them.
Perfect.
So all we need to do is hear from you of what you do and how it works. And the real question is how you keep doing what you do.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that is a question.
Yeah, but I'll let you go ahead, introduce yourself, and let's talk about what landed you in a criminal justice field.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is James Timbry. I am currently a child abuse and neglect investigator for Jefferson County's Children's Division. So that's in the 23rd Circuit. That's the circuit right below St. Louis. Now, I know, so I guess Mississippi, y'all call it Child Protective Services, or I mean, I know we do different names in different states. Illinois is DCFS, but in Missouri, it is Children's Division is what we call it. But we do the same thing. We investigate reports and hotlines of child abuse and neglect, and we try to find the best solution for the children to ensure their safety. Before we get into all of that, so kind of what landed me in this field. I always, growing up, knew I wanted to do something in public service. For a long time, wanted to be a police officer, was on track for that at SEMO in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And just kind of realized I wanted something a little more hands-on, a little more involved, rather than, you deal with one individual, write a report, move on to the next and keep going. I wanted something where I could kind of make more of a difference, a lasting difference, I guess. So I bounced around with some different ideas, ended up changing changed my minor. I stuck with the major of criminal justice, but changed the minor to sociology. And then ended up finding out there was a huge need for Children's Division workers in Missouri. So I moved to St. Louis after graduating and then applied for the job and got it pretty quick. They were definitely hurting for investigators. Something I wanted to do anyway was detective work one day, but when I switched kind of to the more social work field, I saw the investigations of child abuse and neglect, and that really just kind of clicked for me. And then as far as training, so this is kind of odd. So in college, I went through a police academy and had a lot of hands-on work with law enforcement. So I actually didn't receive formal training to become a child abuse and neglect investigator. I just applied for it, and I had a 6-month probationary period where I shadowed other investigators. But I didn't have to do an internship or anything, which is actually kind of odd. A lot of our investigators do internships at different divisions, and then they get paired with whichever one fits best for them. So I did skip that, but that's typically what it looks like is with the internship. And then, so what a typical work day for me looks like, gosh, it varies wildly. You never know when you're gonna get home for sure. You're in at 8. I come in at 8 a.m. But depending on what the situation is, what the hotline is that you were called out for, it could take. I mean, I've been out until 3 a.m. before, just randomly because of the report that I got. There was just no way I could go home. We had to do our I was working with detectives at night, and it just took, all day. And then you're expected to be back at 8 a.m. and you're going to have follow-up work to do on that, on whatever you're doing till 3 a.m. the night before. So a typical work day is pretty hectic. If you're into a field where you're not doing the same thing over and over again every day, I highly recommend this. That's one of the main drivers for why I wanted to do the criminal justice and the public service field anyway, was because I didn't like the idea of just doing, staring at a computer screen and doing the same thing over and over again at the same place. Jefferson County, where I work, is one of the larger counties in Missouri. So I, travel well over 100 miles on a daily basis easily to different homes. And yeah, so it's just a wildly different experience every day. So that can be exciting if that's something you're into, but man, it can be stressful. So if child abuse and neglect is something you're looking into, just kind of be aware of that. And then so I guess if you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask in the chat, or Dr. Rhodes for sure. You can stop me at any point. So I guess the next kind of Dr. Rhodes has given me kind of an outline of some stuff to kind of talk about. And the next question was any patterns that I would see in behaviors of clients. So that's changed also. Well, there's just a whole new litany of issues that we're facing in the realm of child abuse and neglect. A big part of that has been really due to COVID. So I started in 2020, right when everybody was getting used to the changes. And so I at least wasn't used to what it used to be before, which I guess is a good thing. But the issues are multifaceted. I mean, schools are understaffed. We at Children's Division are understaffed. Parents are struggling to meet the needs of their kids, which creates even more reports and hotlines. And we are pretty overloaded. So the pattern for like behavior of clients has kind of changed to, how do we deal with this? What's the best course of action without the proper services that used to be in place? Because they're just not in place anymore. If you want to get counseling for your kid who's gone through trauma, you're on a waiting list for like 6 months, So how are you supposed to work with this family? We've kind of created some new positions at our Children's Division to work with that. So, and then the pattern of just, what I'm trying to say here, like, I don't want to say this is going to sound bad. Children behavior is changing very rapidly, and it's hard for even me. I'm only 28. It's hard for even me to kind of address this with parents because their access to the internet and social media is really just kind of there's just a lot of different stuff happening right now. Kids are acting out in at least in my county in very different ways. So my kind of like my theory behind these issues is that with the way the COVID pandemic kind of pulled the rug out from I guess from the resources in place, I think everybody's just kind of in a scramble mode right now to figure out how to best service the families and the children in my county. And then, I hate to talk about this too. I mean, if I talk about anything that is kind of bothering you or makes you upset, feel free to leave or, or put me on mute or something like that. But there's been a huge increase in fentanyl overdoses in my county, sexual abuse, and just addiction on every level from everything. I mean, it's really terrible. That 3 a.m. case that I was just talking about was a 9-month-old baby was just crawling around and accidentally got into mom and dad's fentanyl and overdosed. And yeah, that was a heck of a case, still ongoing.
Did the baby die, James?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Apparently he had passed before even getting to the hospital, but they were doing the Narcan and everything at the home and then at the hospital and nothing worked. So
do they have you trained in carrying Narcan?
Yeah, we've gone through the training. So that is something that we're all aware of because it is just flooded, at least that part of Missouri, it's flooded everything.
Yeah, that's something I didn't give up. I kept my Narcan, so I have it with me at all times.
Yeah.
I'm retired, but by God, I've got my Narcan with me.
Yeah.
I stopped the other day with a biker that was laying flat on the ground and with another person. And got out of the car and checked it out because I thought where they were at was coming out of a restaurant, and he was flat out on the ground. So I just
Oh,
came
wow.
up with my Narcan in my pocket just in case. It was a diabetic issue though.
Oh, that's
But
good.
you've got to always be ready because those cases pop just any time and they're all
Yeah.
over the place. And I was going to ask you, I'm glad you brought that up. Um, you've probably talked with people that were working as investigators 2011 or on, let's just call it pre-COVID. And the big issue was methamphetamine.
Oh, yeah.
So in our circuit, in a 6-month period, we jumped from a caseload of kids in foster care, 150 to 450 in a 6-month period.
Mm.
So it was like meth was free.
Yeah.
I mean, every day we would remove 10 kids a week in our circuit. And we're in Cape Girardeau. I mean, it's not that big of a locale. It's 100,000 people total in 3 counties. But we
Oh,
had
wow.
4, I think it's lowered now. I think it's in the 300s, but for a while, for several years, it stayed up to 450.
Mm.
Would you know how many are in foster care right now in your circuit? How many kids?
In my circuit, oh gosh, it's a couple hundred, but I don't work in alternative care, so I'm not always in tune with those numbers.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I'm more in touch with the investigative side
Yeah.
stuff. Just
And just to let the students know, go in a little bit. When you say you come in at 8 o'clock, you don't know what you're going to be doing,
yeah.
but your work in the field generates a ton of paperwork, correct?
Oh my lord.
So,
Yeah.
and that's what I saw grow in my years in the field was, well, the first few years, we just basically scrawled something down and it went in a paper file. And
Hmm.
you could read your own writing and you would have to get on the witness stand and testify to what you wrote. But there was no sitting at computers.
No,
Everything was,
yeah.
some secretaries typed some of it up, but most of it you scrawled it in a case log or on a form, and that was entered as evidence in court. You testified, yeah, I was there. We removed the children. This is why, what we saw, and you went it from your notes basically. But
Hmm.
you guys have a whole nother, tell them a little bit about all of the reports, forms, coding, the
Sure.
things. You do a whole lot of that.
Yeah, it's a ton. So there's never any end to the paperwork. Like if you were doing a custody, that's 30 pages about right there. And even on the ones where you're not taking custody of the children, it's still pages and pages for the whole report. So kind of how it works is, you show up to the office, you see what kind of hotlines came in over the night. If they weren't emergencies, that mean we haven't taken action on yet. Because if you get an emergency, you're going out right when you get it, no matter what time. So you come in, you get the report, you call the reporter, and then you go make contact with the kids. You do your interviews with the kids, get to the bottom of what the hotline was made for. Do the home visit with the parents, do the home walkthrough, provide paperwork, and then contact any other people that can have any kind of information on this hotline. But then you get to go back to the office, and like Dr. Rhodes was saying, you start typing all those things that I just mentioned. You have to do a full narrative on. It can't be I spoke with kid this at this time. They said they were doing okay. At the end, you got to really document every little thing because you do get called to court and are asked to recall these things. So yeah, the documentation is intense, and that can create burnout in some people. I'm not a big, I'll be honest, I hate it. I like being out in the field. I like talking with families. I like, helping families. I like ensuring kids' safety. I'm not a big fan of the documentation part of the job. So,
Yeah, and that's it in all criminal justice fields because of the ease of using these screens and laptops and devices. They have required and added into the policy. Just your regular law enforcement officer spends a good part of their time typing things up,
oh yeah,
writing it up, making reports. and the old school ones don't like it. And I don't know what to do about it. I'm definitely not going to prepare my students for that, requiring 10 to 20 page papers, because I
Yeah.
have other hobbies. I don't want to read them.
Been reading that many 20-page
Yeah,
papers.
that
Yeah.
let them be shocked that that's going to be their life and their career. Is
Yeah.
nursing, every field. That's the big thing in every field, is all of the documentation is, it's almost like, how'd we get by before? Well, I think pretty good, but they've
Yeah.
they've required this of you, and it probably will never go away. You guys are stuck.
We are
So,
stuck with it. That is very true.
well, you just mentioned testifying. Go into your court experiences.
Yeah, well, so if you remove a kid from the custody of their parents, they're going to be in court. You write how we do it in Missouri. It's up to me to collect the evidence and write the referral. I send it to our juvenile office. They review it. They send it to a judge, and then a judge grants us custody of the children. But once you do that, you're going to be going to the family support team meeting with different members of the community and around the family. And you got to go to the protective custody hearing. And you might be called to testify. You might be called to speak on what you did. If the family wants to fight it, they have rights. They can request an attorney. I find a lot of times, at least with the cases that I do, the parents have consented. I have one coming up actually on the 29th where they're not, but for the most part, just because I deal with so many drug cases and we're sitting there with a positive drug test, parents aren't going to sit there and argue why their drug test was false or something like that.
You think that is because, I'm sure in your circuit like ours, that the parents are afforded legal counsel. If they can hire them, they will, but 90% don't have the funds to hire an attorney. And so
True.
they are appointed a counsel from a list of local
Yeah.
attorneys.
Yes,
And so
sir.
they're represented. Do you think most of those attorneys are telling them to admit and go along with the court, or what's going on with that?
I have a suspicion that they do tell them to go along with it when the evidence is so solid as saying you tested positive for methamphetamine. Like, what do you want? What's your goal here? To say that the test was falsified or something, because otherwise you just need your best course of action is to do what you need to do to get your children back at this point.
And the federal law really pushes. This came about in around it was late 90s, because Judge Stephen Limbaugh had just rolled up to the Supreme Court from our circuit. He was my juvenile judge, and he had just rolled up to the Supreme Court. And so he traveled the state talking about the new federal laws about reunification and about the efforts, reasonable efforts for, you had to show and I had to show as a juvenile officer to try to return those kids home.
Oh yeah.
So that also is all documented and discussed. So parents are hearing that. They're hearing those words all the time. We're trying to get those kids home to you, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's definitely true. I take no pleasure in taking custody of children. I'll be totally honest. I've ran across workers where they do have that attitude. I want to, take these children out of home, put them in foster care, and give them a better future, that kind of thing. I actually agree with our current director, Judge. Well, he's not judge anymore. Daryl Missy, our current director. He's of the belief that the child's best hope for a future is in the home with the family. And I'm fully on board with that. I do not enjoy removing children from parents. So yeah,
Well,
I'm
most of
all
those
for it.
kids try to reunify. I mean, even the ones that are adopted out of those bad situations. I had lunch with a guy today whose brother just adopted four children, a four-children set from, it's not our state though, it's somewhere else. But this guy was going on about, he's providing these kids with everything, taking them everywhere. The oldest is like 15. It's from 15 years old down to 8 years old. And I sit there and listen. It's like no use messing this guy's bubble up, but eventually, especially those older ones, are going to want to reunify with their parents.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
they're
Oh,
adopted by these people and they're given a, you know, what, upper middle class life, I guess. The guy's got a travel trailer, UV or RV, and takes them all over the country and is providing a lot for them. But I've watched that situation a lot, and
mhm.
eventually they're going to really work hard to get back to mom and dad.
They will. Yeah. And they'll start acting out in bad ways too if they're not reunified.
Yeah.
At least I've
So,
seen
um, what's some of the, let's just call them success stories? What do you have going that's really worked out?
it. Well, so my success stories might be different, I guess, than a lot of other investigators. Just with I love the family unit. I like to see families stay together, not be separated. So there was a case that I had where there's one of many, but there was one case that I had where it was a pretty bad domestic violence situation. And if honestly, if I had typed it all up and sent the report over to the juvenile office, they might have actually said, "Hey, we should go ahead and place these kids in state custody." They weren't being harmed; the kiddos were not. It was about mom and dad, though. And we've had to take custody on those before. Um, but rather than go that route, what I did at first was I just told mom I wanted to meet with her. And I spent, it was at least an hour and a half at her home, just kind of talking with her about everything. And I convinced her to, well, I didn't convince her. I just kind of explained to her the situation, talked to her about the cycle of violence, about what you want your kids to be seeing. And if you want your girls to think this is okay, basically. She ended up agreeing with me. She and one of her daughters moved out. She filed for divorce. She still emails me on occasion. A little bit cheesy. She calls me her guardian angel, but she said that I was just the first one that ever explained to her that was just not okay to be treated that way. And it wasn't even physical violence, to be honest with you. It was extreme verbal and the kind of like the punching the drywall, that kind of stuff, slamming doors. But it was getting way out of hand, just what was being said. So she's doing great. But like I said, she still emails me and thanks me for what I said to her that day. And then I like to think about that too, just because those kiddos could have been taken out of the home and put in a foster home somewhere. And that would have been a whole nother thing, more strife. The kids didn't want to leave their parents. They loved both their parents. They just didn't want to be together anymore. Both kids told me that. They said, "We love our mom and dad. We just want them to divorce."
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one story.
That's good. That's good. Um, the amount of trauma that kids go through in some of these situations, I don't know with the baby that died situation if there's other children in the home or not.
There was. I had to take
Yeah.
custody of that kiddo.
Yeah. Well, that you can, depending on the age, that kid will have cycle through problems from now on. There'll
Yeah.
be different life events that there'll be problems. I took custody of two, a little boy and a little girl once, who's the baby. They were put in charge of the baby at an apartment complex while mom went out to score some drugs, and
Mm.
they decided to give the baby a bath. Well, mom came home to a full bathtub running over with the baby drowned. And
Oh.
the little ones were they were pretty small. They were like two. They were walking and they could pull the baby into the bathtub, but they were
Mm.
little guys. You couldn't get stories from them of what happened. It was just obvious what happened. But the little girl ended up with a whole lot of trouble and with her kids in custody, and the boy ended up in a lot of problems too. But as that boy got older and he was in foster homes and residential and other stuff, he had night terrors about that drowning.
Oh,
And that,
wow.
that happened when he was really small and it wasn't discussed, brought up. He wasn't, overloaded with the information, but it was stuck in his head.
That's
I'm
terrible.
sure he's in prison now. He did a lot of different stints. If he's not in, he's on paper, he's on probation, parole, or something.
Yeah.
But some of the situations never go away. You're talking about
True.
your cases, and I'm hearing from you. You're already seeing that. I'll give you my oldest. Next month in November, it's the first law day in November. I have a letter going to the court, and I'm going to court to get to support a guy that's going to get his adult cases. He lives in another state, but he was one of my early probationers. He's 46 years old now. And he's 46. And yeah, he was a kid, and I was a kid when I was his probation officer, basically.
Oh, wow.
But we have stayed in touch this whole time, and he's never had another law violation, and hasn't done anything else. And we finally got it arranged to get his cases pulled off his, the Missouri law changed recently where you can get that done. The word escapes me, the simple word they call it, to get your record clean. But anyhow, that expunged. But that just happened 2 years ago, that you can get your cases expunged.
Oh, wow.
So I called Travis and said, man, the law has changed. You want this done? Yeah, I want this done. So I've been his walkthrough guy, because he lives up on Lake Michigan up in northern Ohio. And we've walked it through. I hope and pray the thing goes off. But some of these people you never turn loose of.
Yeah, wow.
So,
Can you tell us how old was he when you got well, can you share that, I guess, how old he was?
Yeah, I got involved with him when he was 10, 11 years old, and just misdemeanor, nothing to go on probation, no big cases. But then his mom and dad, he was about 15, 16 years of age, and was going to school up here in Jackson, Missouri. And mom and dad just decided they didn't want to be parents anymore and abandoned him. So he was one of the guys that just, lived from couch to couch.
Yeah.
But we didn't have anything to attach. If you don't have jurisdiction or nothing to do if they're not bad enough, you can't always help them as a juvenile officer. So he was living fine. He was going to school, had a place to go. Well, right after he turned 17, he got drunk with some buddies, and they talked him into climbing a drain pipe on a business downtown, going through a window, and he passed out on the floor, set off the alarms, and caught a burglary charge.
Oh, man.
And since his parents weren't in town, the public defender pled him out. He didn't know any difference. It's like, I'm going to do 6 months. But that has hounded him his whole life.
What an interesting story. Wow.
Yeah. So it's hounded him his whole life. And, even though he's doing well, he has a good job, but he has the same job that he had when he moved to Ohio when he was 17 after this charge, probably 18 after he did his 6 months. But, he's always been on edge because, is somebody going to find out? And he was a wrestler, and it came up a year ago that his daughter wanted him to wrestle. She was a high school wrestler and wanted him to help coach. And he couldn't do it because he was worried that they'd run a criminal records check.
Yeah.
So this is going to get all that expunged. Where both of us are definitely going out to eat after that court case gets done.
That's awesome.
So there will be a Cajun feast downtown Cape Girardeau.
Oh, nice.
So, but yeah, you see a whole lot of people, thousands of people in a career, but some of them call you back. So need help, need a touchstone, I guess I'd call it.
That's definitely something that there's a lot of bad things to say about this field, but that's something, if you're interested in the kind of work that does give you that kind of reward to where you feel like you did, or you made a difference, that can be fulfillment in and of itself. That makes the stress and the long nights and the 2 a.m. phone calls to get out of here to go down and take custody of a kiddo, that makes it worth it, to an extent, if that's something that you're interested in.
So what's a situation you've walked into that has been one of those moments like, well, this is a time I might die?
There was a guy that came at me with a shovel one time. And that wasn't fun. And I forgot, well, I didn't have to bring law. I guess I should have mentioned this too, by the way. At least in Missouri, Child Protective Service, we bring law enforcement with us on a lot of calls. If they come in, they can come in coded as investigations or family assessment. It's an investigation. We got to bring law enforcement. But there's one time I didn't. This guy came at me with a shovel. Apparently he was a heroin addict and he was beating up his girlfriend, and his girlfriend's son was seeing the beatings. So that was one scenario. And then actually I did one where unfortunately that 9 months did pass away. I'm the one that found the fentanyl in the home search. I got a little bit too close to it. So that was another time.
Mm, mm.
I didn't
Yeah.
recognize it at first. I had never seen it in person until that night. So,
Oh, that's scary. That's real scary, James. I won't tell your dad about that.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, there's you have the ones that you did something or that you were in that situation, and then you have others you don't know that people because you're in the community with them. Hillsborough is not that Festus is not that big a place, so you have to grocery shop.
Yeah.
So that happens. I had one occasion with my wife and daughters where a very dangerous client that was being watched by the FBI and all kinds of bad stuff said she saw my wife at the grocery store with my girls and they looked really nice and everything, and talked about them and what they had on. And so I know she really did. And that was, to me, that scared the crap out of me early on in my career.
Yeah.
And then I had another situation where I was fishing with a guy in a real secluded spot. I mean, this was not a fishing lake, conservation fishing lake. This was one you had to drag the boat through the weeds, down the hill to get to this spot.
Oh yeah.
And I had one of the first little plastic bass boats in this area. So I was in a real distinctive boat with an old guy from Wales who wore a crazy jacket with his national flag on the back, which is a dragon. So, I mean, it was weird stuff,
Yeah.
And this guy described to a childcare worker that, hey, I had Randy in my sights with my gun. He was poaching deer. And he said he was deer hunting, but he was poaching. And he goes, I had him in the sights, and he described everything, what the guy had on, what kind of boat I had. And he lived in the general area, but he had been on the banks of that little lake and had watched me through a scope.
Oh man.
So he goes, yeah, I was in enough trouble. I decided not to go ahead and pull the trigger. So I had no idea there was no vehicle, no way of knowing this guy was that close.
Yeah.
But, you have situations, you're doing something that can really tend to piss people off by removing their children.
Yeah. I've had to threaten a dad with kidnapping charges for not giving me his children. So you can imagine that got pretty dang heated.
What helps though is being as honest with them as possible.
Yeah.
I have seen the situation where a child care worker has kind of backed off or told them some things that they couldn't back up later on, made promises they couldn't keep. And I mean, those people had a target on their back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even in the real bad situations, if you're just upfront, honest, straight out with people, it seems to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anything else that we haven't talked about? You're like, well, how come this old man hasn't asked that question?
Yeah. I mean, so there was one on here about the biggest obstacles and frustrations with the job. I'm not sure if we kind of touched on it a little bit already. If that's something you want to go into.
Yeah, I do. It's something that I've spent the last year writing and rewriting a letter or a policy statement to the Judge Missy, your boss, your main guy, and to the governor's office. Because I was on numerous committees and I did numerous policy work with state courts and the Supreme Court. on preparing standards. So still feel like I got a couple ideas of,
Okay.
what causes stress and what goes on with the system. In most states that your job, they do take custody of children. There's not that intermediate step with the juvenile office.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't know if you see that as a problem or a little bit of a stressor or not, but it
that's
is
good.
a,
I think from a state standpoint, it kind of makes sense, and in theory, I guess it would prevent some horror stories of a vindictive CPS worker, like coming in and just grabbing kids. You don't want to see that. Uh, but man, it does create some hassle. I mean, the common misconception is that when I show up to a place, parents freak out. They think I'm just going to take their kids. In Missouri, we can't do that. Like Dr. Rhodes said, I have to have law enforcement, a physician, or the juvenile office sign off on the spot. I'm going to remove your kid on the spot. Otherwise, I have to go write a referral and go through that whole process. So I definitely see it as I think I am on board with it at this point, just because I still can do what I have to do as far as removing kids on the spot. I just need a police officer with me. So
that was always best. And you have your favorites. You have officers that can cope and not stir it up more, and then you have others
mhm.
that tend to throw gasoline on the fire, so to speak.
Yeah,
So it was always good when you got the right officer. You can't always pick, but that always made a difference.
yeah.
So
Sometimes it's a little fun though when they do that. But yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I really, and because he was a judge in your circuit, I really have a lot of faith in Judge Missy as a director now of Missouri Children's Division, bringing what he knows
Hmm.
in, because before Judge Missy, um, I don't know how to put it, political hacks. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just like
no,
your department had, and ours at the state level does too, have people that are just politicians.
yeah,
They haven't worked the cases like that judge has, and I think that makes a big difference.
yeah.
Hopefully some of the stressors will be turned around. What
Hope so.
ideas do you have for you for the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, honestly, well, a little over a year ago, I actually drafted a 2 weeks notice and had it ready to go. I was like, I'm gonna wait for a bit, and then we got Judge Misty, and while he hasn't made tons of changes, I can tell he wants to make the changes. And I mean, it's a government job; it takes a long time to make the changes. So I see myself still being here for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, well, good,
Yeah.
good. The thing that held me in there the longest was taking advantage of the state job opportunity to get my tuition reimbursed.
Oh yeah.
I came in with a bachelor's degree in history, and
Oh wow.
that was it. I had no idea I was going into this field, but then with the tuition reimbursement, then I got a master's in criminal justice. And then
Mm.
at that point, that worked out good for a while. And then the grants really came in, and our circuit was allowed through Judge Limbaugh to open 4 alternative schools. That's the good news, that all those kids got to go to school. The bad news is the juvenile officer was in charge of all those grants.
Ooh.
So I was all of a sudden a superintendent of schools.
Oh
So,
my
so I
God.
went back to school to get my superintendent's license and get a doctorate in education administration, because I was hiring and firing teachers, looking at curriculum. I had
Really?
principals that were working for me. Yeah, the Safe School Act in Missouri went through the juvenile courts. So
Mm.
all of a sudden we were educators. But you still have that tuition reimbursement thing, right?
Oh yes, sir. We do.
Okay. Well, I was ready to go before that really clicked in, and I started school, just
Mm.
studying the theory and knowing that I had more degrees and could leave, I think kept me there.
Yeah.
Um, I probably would have a larger retirement now if I ended up jumping to be a school
Yeah.
superintendent, but I don't, that's not important. I have enough, so I'm not really worried about, well, I could have had more if I had a different job. But the education really helped, and then having the opportunity to teach some really
Hmm.
helped. So
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about using that. Explain to them what that reimbursement's like.
Yeah. So we have some people that I'm working with. That's their whole goal for why they're here. I really actually when I got the job, I wasn't even aware of it. So to the best of my knowledge, after 2 years, they will pay for your schooling, but you do have to be there for I think it's 10 years. Is that right? I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Yeah, I think you signed some. I've known a few that's left after they've got like their masters in psychological counseling that left in a whole lot less than that. But I don't know if they chase you for that or not. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. No, it's definitely another bonus. Because one of the few things that's not a bonus is the pay, but Missouri actually is specifically bad on the pay. I've actually, unfortunately, Googled average pay for child protective service. It's not bad. Missouri's pretty bad about it. So if it's a career you want to go into in another state, you'll be at least pretty comfortable.
well, that was one of the points in the thing I keep rewriting almost every morning when I have coffee. It's like if they did away with this secondary paralegal juvenile officers having to review everything, they could
Yeah,
pay these people more money and give them
yeah,
full
that's true.
authority like they do in Illinois. So
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just an old juvenile officer sitting down with paper, but I'm still going to send it someday.
Yes, please do. Help us out.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing. Keep my email and let me know how it goes for you and what you end up doing.
Yeah, sure thing.
And any questions? Last chance for you students to ask Mr. James here a question. I'll give you a second to see. No one has typed one in. Normally when I hear from them later, it's that, well, you asked everything. Well, I interview a lot of people. How about one thing, just one thing before we go off, interviewing skills, because
Yeah,
both of my classes try to send out to talk to a few people. I make it easy for them, a few people in the field, but you're interviewing people that are uh, antagonistic or high
mhm,
or worried
yeah,
about what you're going to do. Talk about how you kind of develop the interviewing skills for the
yeah,
job.
yeah, sure thing. So, the my specialty, I think one thing that I'm actually good at is interviewing the children that I'm concerned about. I have a good, I'm pretty effective, I guess. I take my time with it. I build rapport with them, and I get to the bottom. They always, by the end of the interview, feel comfortable enough speaking to me. Even there was one report, a sexual abuse report, and I showed up to the home. They're like, "This is a guy. He's going to talk to our daughter about the sex abuse." They're like, "This can't be the case." And I said, "I have to." And it was a pretty long interview. By the end, they were like, I'm blown away. She told you everything. She was totally comfortable. So you'll develop that over time. I'll right off the bat pretty comfortable with it. And then I've just tried to improve different techniques. As far as antagonistic parents that are allegedly sometimes high, you just kind of keep an eye out for different signs and symptoms of drug use. Because quite frankly, if you're under the influence, I'll try to get you to spill the beans maybe, but you never know what the interview is going to turn out into.
Yeah, and
Uh,
they can, and in court, the attorneys always can argue, well, they were under the influence, so what he told them wasn't true.
exactly.
So that's not, yeah, it's not point. Couple questions. Do you take your job home with you? Is it stressful outside of work?
It is, yeah. I take it home with me in the sense, yeah, there have been a few investigations. It depends on the week, it depends on the investigation you receive. Some stuff is just disturbing. I will say, like after the child fatality with the fentanyl overdose on the 9-month-old, I was in the medical examiner rooms with the body for about 3 hours, just waiting for things to get processed. And yeah, you do too. I mean, you'll have some maybe a dream or two about it, that kind of thing. So you will take it home with you. You're dealing with children that terrible things have happened to. There's no way to not take it home, I would think. Um, and then stressful outside of work. That just depends on your caseload, which for us is really high. But if your caseload is pretty low, which mine has been in the past, I wasn't really that stressed as long as when I was done at 5 allegedly. I felt like I had done a full day's work
They used to have limits set, but I think they've blown those limits. I don't think they follow that anymore, but
for
there used to,
caseload.
yeah, used to be a caseload. Yeah, here you go. There used to be a caseload limit, and if they went over, they could hire more officers or more
Ah,
child abuse investigators. But given the COVID issues, the issue now isn't lack of money, it's lack of employees.
yeah,
They can't
yeah.
find enough people
What
to
was the
do the
limit? Do you remember
jobs.
for cases?
I think it was 30.
Yeah, okay. That is when you hit the 30 mark, they do start trying to get you to get some stuff. I'm
Yeah.
below 30 right
Well,
now, but
I think
St.
it's
Louis
the
is
law.
terrible. They're like,
I think
yeah,
it's the law. Uh,
allegedly.
one other question. Can he expand on the lack of housing? I work at the Boys and Girls Club and the wait list is unreal. How are they taking steps to help children with government programs?
So are you talking about kids that are actively homeless right now, or
I think maybe for families, well, if you work at Boys and Girls Club, they're probably, unless they want to expand, they're probably working with kids that, are probably stacking in with other people, other homes, families all
Mhm,
living together. You've seen that, I'm sure, in lots of
yeah.
investigations. You have any big effort in your community to work on homeless or work on housing issues?
That for Jefferson County at least is not that big of an issue in my county. I'll be honest. It's a really big county. There is tons of HUD housing, not always available, but I always have resources for that. I provide to families who are in between homes, and I get them set up. But there has really not been that terrible. You go up one circuit to St. Louis, it's a disaster. I don't know what they're doing up there or how they're handling it. To be honest with you, they have 10 investigators for the entire metropolitan area. So they are in full on crisis mode. So, but yeah, as far I don't have a great answer for that because I really haven't worked too much with that in Jefferson County.
Yeah, given that St. Louis just lost its rating as the murder capital of the United States, it'd be hard to send a child abuse investigator out in the field without a protection,
Yeah, and cops don't go out with you
even
either.
with 2 or 3 police officers.
Yeah,
We're at high risk, so they're
yeah,
having trouble keeping those workers in the field.
yeah. They're pulling us now from Jefferson County to come help. So
Oh no, oh, I don't
yeah,
like hearing that.
yeah.
Keep that resume fresh.
I will. I will.
All right. Well, I have used up my time. I don't let, since they're recorded and it's hard to listen to an hour. I tell students to break it up, the ones that have to listen. Um, but this has been great. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And stay in touch. Stay in touch. I really want to hear where you end up, what goes
Yeah,
on
sure
with
thing.
you. All
Will
right.
do.
Really
Well,
enjoyed
Jen,
really
go ahead.
enjoyed all stories.
Oh, yep.
Really
Thank you.
enjoyed all of y'all.
Yeah, anybody that wants to
Thank
click their microphone on, go ahead. Anything else to add before we click off? Yeah, this is always when I get evaluations for the class, this is always the best part.
Awesome.
Just,
Awesome. Yeah.
getting speakers in, students really like this and really get a taste of what goes on out there in the real
Hmm.
world. So
Yeah, we have tons of people that just got out of college doing this job. So it's frontline. It's like it's your first stop for
yep.
sure. So
First step to get the skills to do a whole lot of other things.
definitely.
I know many child abuse investigators that are now, they're attorneys, they're psychological counselors, they're school principals, they're
Hmm.
school teachers. They can branch into a whole lot of things and be really have rewarding careers. But I do know some that stayed with it the whole time till they retired. There's a certain special group that kind of eat this stuff up,
Yeah.
which I am part of.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, students. Thank you for loading up the class and being here with us. And James, have a good night.
Thank you. Y'all
All
too.
right. Thank you, sir.